So I had 3 fundamental errors, and I actually came across a 4th. So this is the 4 fundamental areas to avoid. So a little bit of a background. Yes, I've been writing grants forever and ever, and I teach grant writing at Humber and at Seneca. I speak with or have people come in who are leaders of small to large foundations, telling us what they like about grant proposals, or more, what we're seeing more and more funding applications, and what they don't like. And there's a lot that they don't like. You can imagine that it's getting very competitive out there, especially with the COVID pandemic. And I don't know how many of you participated in the recent OTF resiliency fund, but it seemed like everyone was putting something in. And I know I worked on quite a few with my clients. And there'll be another one coming up in December. So be interesting to see how that all pans out. But today I have a slide presentation, and I know I have an hour, so you'll get a copy of this presentation. Don't worry if you don't go through all of it, but some of it will be a refresher to you. Maybe there will be new information as well. So one of the first things that some of you might not know, and always comes as a surprise, is that foundations are actually registered charities, right? They're a diverse group of family and private and community foundations, and they give a lot every year. In 2017, almost $7 billion. So, knowing how to write a grant and how to research prospects is really important for every organization. But I always say it's most important for small organizations that don't have big fundraising machines and people and the funds to be able to put out direct response campaigns and hold special events. Indeed, many small organizations start with foundation grants and get their foundation of programs off the ground with foundation grants. So they're very important. And I go quite often to the Philanthropic Foundations Canada site to get the latest information. And so we see, while we have about 85,000 or 86,000 registered charities in Canada, there are about 11,000 foundations out of those, so 74,000 charitable organizations. So not only are our foundations giving a lot of money away, there's a lot of them. Now, the first thing somebody might say is, yeah, but not all of them are giving money away. A lot of them have predetermined the cause they're going to support, and that's very true. And that's why platforms like Grant Connect, for instance, are important to use and to subscribe to. iWave as well, a big database as well. So that's the first thing to do or first mistake to avoid is don't try to do it on your own. Invest in a platform that will help you, especially in the area of prospect research. For those of you who don't know, the way foundations get their money is they invest their money, and they're required to give 3% of their assets to charities. In fact, most give closer to 8% if we really look at the numbers. And, while they've been around for many, many years, they continue to grow, especially private foundations. More and more family foundations are popping up. Younger families with high individual wealth are forming foundations for various reasons. They could be philanthropic, they could be financial, but public foundations have kind of maintained over the last 5 years, but private foundations grow. What does that mean? Well, as grant writers, we are, it's incumbent to us to keep the research going. That just because we did research 3 years ago and think what we know about, think all we know is about the current foundations. There are many new ones popping up each year that that need to be researched. So when I talk about this with my students, private foundations and public foundations, while it's interesting to know, it's not really important to know. A private foundation is controlled by a single donor or family through a board that's the majority of directors are at non-arm's length. That means if you have a private foundation, you can have your husband or your wife, your brother, your sister-in-law, all be on that foundation, and you register as a charity with Revenue Canada. And as a public foundation, it's the opposite, right? So you have to have the majority of people, like the Durham Community Foundation, have to be at arm's length in your board. So you can't have many family members or friends or co-workers on that board of directors. So it makes a bit of a difference, whereas public foundations, you will see that their board of directors is probably more representative of the constituency that's being served by the foundation. So, as I said, good things to know, but what really matters and what I want to talk about today are the errors to avoid. If we have time, we'll go into the proposal components. And then finally, the keys for success, which is a one-page slide that keeps changing every year with every course I deliver, because you know, I don't pretend to know everything that is perfect with respect to applying for funding to foundations. I learn a lot every year through my courses, through presenters that join me, and even through the students who are taking the course, because a lot of them have early experience in grant writing, and they're able to relay some of the feedback they receive from foundations to me. But I'm always keen to learn more about what makes a grant proposal successful. When someone from Trillium or the Peter Gilligan Foundation comes in and talks to my class, I'm in the front row, keener, taking all kinds of notes. It's one of the reasons I like teaching, because I continue to learn. So, as I said, I've switched this presentation to 4 fundamental errors to avoid, and they have to do with need, solution, results, evaluation. These are 4 components that when you look at your grant proposal, whether you're starting it or have completed, you know, have you addressed these 4 areas sufficiently? Because out of all the other areas, they are the most important areas, and they are the ones that funders read or look for in a grant proposal. And if they have a hard time finding that, if the need is buried somewhere in the middle of your proposal, you're going to have a tough time getting considered. Number one error that I see and think that happens is that the need is not well researched or evidence-based. And a lot of us might write about breakfast clubs or food banks or mental health counseling clinics in the community. The need may be very obvious to us, but it might not be obvious to the funder. And the funder still needs to know whether the need is real or not. So it's not enough to say that how many people attended or participated or received food from your food bank. You have to go deeper than that and say, you know, here's what the need is. Here's the relationship between feeding people and poverty. Here's the relationship between mental health and unemployment. So great ideas are not good enough. It's not enough to say we're getting together, we're forming this charity, and we're going to help kids, achieve more scholastically or academically. We have to identify the need. As I said too, the existence of the problem is not always obvious to everyone, certainly not as obvious to us. I worked with a organization in Oakville, for instance, who was tackling poverty in Oakville. And I remember, and again, I grew up not in that area, but every time I think of Oakville, I think of wealth and prosperity, and would have thought, what kind of poverty could there be in Oakville? But there's a lot of poverty in Oakville. And so that problem wasn't obvious to me. And once I read and worked with the organization to research the extent of poverty, I was able to describe the need in an evidence-based manner. Documenting your need even before you start your proposal is really key, and it stops many organizations dead in their tracks when they haven't documented the need, when they haven't researched that need. I'll tell you something, what happens most often when I start working on a proposal or a case for support, writing the proposal is fairly straightforward. Many times the organization hasn't documented the need. They say, yes, we serve that need. It's obvious the need is there. Kids are coming to their after school program. Kids, families are visiting their food bank. Scholarships are needed to get to even the playing field for medical schools. So, but they haven't documented the need, and that is what I find usually takes the most time, going back, doing all that research, whether it's academic or not, and then being able to document the need. That can be a very onerous task, but if you focus on your target population, those people that you're serving, and be as specific as you can, it's a little easier to document the need. I mean, we can go on forever and ever and talk about poverty in Canada or poverty in Pickering or Durham region. But if we are concerned with poverty amongst seniors in Durham region, our research gets more focused, and you'll find it's easier to document your need. But documenting that need is really key. As a matter of fact, it's what we open with grant proposals. We don't open with the history of our organization or what our organization does. We put that last. And the very first thing is we say, here's the need, and the funder relates to the need. They don't relate to the organization. They relate to the need and then to the solution. So they say, well, Peter, you know, how do we do this research? Well, sometimes it costs money. We have to hire people to do research, academics. And sometimes we can get a lot by just scouring the internet and looking at different reports. Quite often we can take national trends and say, okay, we found empirical research that, you know, for instance, so many Indigenous youth or all youth are graduating high school, and we compare that to the rate of Indigenous youth graduating high school over the course of the country. We then can take that down and we can talk about that at the beginning of our application, and then we take it down to regional observations, which are often media-based. So if they correspond with the national trends and the empirical research, we can mention the media reports. And then if we're talking about Indigenous youth in North Bay, Ontario, we can talk about our own community experience that quite often through surveys and focus groups, we can say, yes, while only 60% of Indigenous youth are graduating high school across the country, our experience in this community is even greater, that the need is even greater. And that, following this process, puts a nice package together for a funder, and we can put this package together, identifying the need in one page or even less. So, identifying the need. The second is your solution is not well researched or evidence-based. You have to be able to show why you believe your solution is working or not working. And again, I find a lot of organizations fall down on this. They have been running the same programs and services year after year, and their numbers grow, so it seems to be working. But you have to realize you're competing against a lot of other organizations, and you have to show, well, not only is it working, not only are we increasing our reach, but we've done research to show that the families or the Indigenous youth that we work with have gone on to achieve a post-secondary education or employment. The same will be with kids who are going to our breakfast club. You know, they're not just fed, but they've gone on. Teachers have reported that they have more concentration in the classroom. They're achieving higher grades. And again, like the need, this takes time and effort. And one thing as grant writers or as fundraisers we can do is encourage our program managers to invest the time and resources to measure their solution, and not only reach, but, and we'll talk about that a little later, but, you know, why is your solution working? How do you know it's working? A history of why and how it was developed. Is this borrowed from a European experience, an experience across the border? Was it developed by an academic who wanted to try a new solution? So it's really key to invest time and resources into measuring outcomes. And you'll see there's not a funding application that I haven't come across that doesn't ask you about outcomes and results. And again, if you haven't done this work, it stops you dead in your tracks when applying for funding. And I still see many organizations, and I review many grant applications that say, well, of course it's working. Look, last year we helped 500 families. This year we helped 800 families. I'm working with a foundation right now that hands out emergency cards to students living in poverty. And so it seems evident that that's a good thing to do, because families come up to school principals and teachers and demonstrate a need. But I said to them, well, what happens after? How do we know? What happens with those families that you're helping, and how does that enhance their ability to achieve more out of their education? And they said, well, we've never really looked at that. We thought it was just a good thing to do, and people are responding to that. Well, they still are, and I don't want to mislead you and say, you know, foundations won't respond to that at all, but now's the time to look at the solution and measure the outcome and the results. So that's the second area that fundamental error that is often committed. And the next two are really related to the second. You don't demonstrate how you will measure success. So we are going to do this. We're going to have so many children or families run through our program. We're going to be giving these services. But what we forget about is evaluation. And largely, we forget about evaluation because it's expensive to do. Good evaluation is often done externally from the organization, objectively by professional evaluators within the discipline that you're working. So we have to answer the question more and more now, how will the program be evaluated? Probably one of the greatest examples in this area is Pathways to Education, that invested years ago a ton of money in looking at their after-school program and following the students who have gone through their program and what's happened with them after they graduated high school. A very common question that you'll need to answer in just about every proposal or grant application is, how will success be determined? And this is not the time to list a dozen ways you're going to determine success. Remember, when you answer the question, how success will be determined, you're going to want to indicate your key performance indicators. And what I usually suggest is that we keep those to a minimum. They have to be relevant, they have to be strong, but we want to make sure that we can measure them and keep track of them as the program is executed. So 3 or 4 key performance indicators, such as, in the case of a after-school program, graduation rates, rates of access to post-secondary education, and maybe employment rates. So that might be an example. What are the key performance indicators, and how will success be determined? And then finally, and this, I've already touched upon this, is you confuse reach with results. And I found this through presentations from charitable, foundations, and for some of them, it drives them crazy. They want to know the outcomes. Reach is an output and not an outcome. So, and this is kind of an academic question. Sometimes we focus a lot on, in class, on these definitions: output, outcome, impact, results, goals, objectives, and so on. Being able to be on the same page when we use this language. So anything that a program produces, like recipe books or educational material, or even attendance at a healthy cooking class, is an output, for instance, not an outcome. Reaching 300 families living in poverty is an output. We've had 300 families run through our healthy cooking program, and that's the result of our work. Well, that's just an output, and sometimes it might have to be good enough, but if you can measure a little further, like saying, we've also improved their measured economic situation, that is an outcome. So we follow those families, that we've helped with poverty issues, or we follow those families who enrolled in our healthy cooking. And yes, 6 months later, a year later, 70% of them are still utilizing some of their learnings in their daily family cooking. So that's really important, because growing your program's reach just isn't enough anymore. Foundations are asking for more information on your program and the demonstration of what your program is achieving. So I'm going to stop here just for a second, if I may, and see if there are any questions so far. Oh, I see Eva is here, one of our students. That's great to see. Any questions? So, okay, none. All pretty straightforward. Okay, let me continue then. So the next important part of grant writing, I find, is preparing a template proposal. And when you read a lot of information about grant writing, you might say, "Oh, don't use template proposals. They're the we can't just use a template proposal and put a different name and address on it and send it out." And that's not what I'm really suggesting. I use this technique quite often because it helps me with the great variety of funding applications and proposal requirements that are out there. And all too often, we tend to work one proposal at a time. So we'll apply to the Allen Slate Foundation, and then we'll apply to the Clifford Foundation with a different proposal. Well, if we know we need X amount of dollars, and we know that, 1 in 10 or 2 in 10 are going to say yes to our proposal, then we already have an idea of how many prospects we have to research. We already have an idea that we're going to be writing a lot of online applications and grant proposals. So why not prepare a key document, kind of a case for support, but a little beyond, that has 10 key components. So, number one, and I know this might seem obvious, is a good executive summary. Whenever I teach grant writing in school, and one of the assignments is to put together a grant proposal for a charity, the weight of marking is is more on the executive summary than anything else. So it's the last document written. It's not a cut and paste from the proposal. It is a well-crafted, well-written, one-page summary of what you're asking. If this is not done properly, then you most likely won't get your grant proposal read. This executive summary also serves as great passages in online applications when you have to be more emotional about describing your program, the need and solution. So at the end, when your proposal is finished, take a day, take 2 days, have everyone read it, and write a powerful executive summary. Sometimes, and this has happened, it might be all you need and all that somebody is going to read. And I'll tell you why. Because here's what you should have in your executive summary. You have talked about the need in a paragraph, as I said before, really key. The solution in one paragraph, right? Why the solution works, what your goals, objectives, and the cost of your program. Not what you're asking them necessarily right now, but the cost of the entire program. Then your financial request, and then your organizational background. And what do we see quite often in the executive summary? We see half a page of how great our organization is, our achievements, and then we get to a solution for a need that's yet undetermined. And then somewhere at the bottom is the need. Well, we have to flip that executive summary around and say, X amount of students are not graduating high school in Durham region. The reason is pockets of poverty and being able to back that up. Our solution is a little different from the normal after-school program. Here it is, goals, objectives, and costs, financial requests. And here's a little bit about our organization. Probably the hardest one-page document you'll write. But once it's complete, it allows you and everyone in your organization to fully understand what you're asking for. So, really the second part of your proposal is the first part that you write is you talk about the need, and this will probably take you as long. So you have to give evidence of the problem. Why does the problem exist? Because not every foundation will be familiar with this need or why it exists. Some might not even know it exists, as I mentioned the example of the Oakville charity fighting poverty in Oakville. A very good thing to put into the need is what will happen if nothing is done, right? We see this all the time with climate change proposals and climate change reports. If we do nothing today, what is the future going to likely be look like? And if you can, then try to elaborate on this in the needs section of your proposal. What happens to the rate of poverty if more students don't graduate high school or find meaningful employment? We then go on to the solution, and this section in the grant proposal is just an outline. Again, it might be half a page of your solution to the problem and why you believe that solution works, going back to the evidence-based. So that they have a very top-of-the-line understanding on what you're doing. So here's the need, here's why the need exists, here's what will happen if we don't do anything, this is what we want to do, here's an outline of it, and we are slowly drawing that funder in. They're interested in the need, they're saying, that's an interesting solution. Let's look at the plan of action. How are they going to ever execute that solution? And that's where you can expand on it. Again, not too long, because we want to remember that grant proposal still should not exceed 5 or 6 pages. And even when we keep it down to that, many foundations require a 2 to 3 page proposal. Now, some are really unreasonable and they require a whole bunch of information in 2 pages. So, it's difficult to do. So quite often you have to produce various versions of your proposal, one that might be 5 or 6 pages, one that might be 2 or 3 pages, and then again, your executive summary. Your plan of action usually is broken up into logical steps as you detail the elements of your solution. So take them from the beginning right through to the outcome, and so that's important. And sometimes that can be done graphically, simply with a PowerPoint graphic and what you're going to do at the beginning and what are some of the steps you're going to take. If we had a little bit more time today, I'd be happy to show you that, but that logical chain of logic is really important, and making it easy for funders to follow is really key. And that's probably another thing I haven't really mentioned, is that whenever you can use an infographic or an illustration to replace copy or words, try to do that. Sometimes an entire program can be explained, with one really good infographic. And believe me, people having to read 30 or 40 proposals a day will like that. And if that infographic doesn't capture absolutely everything, doesn't have to, as long as it generates interest. And then the funder says, I really like your proposal. Can you answer these questions? And funders will do this all the time. Then that's great. So don't ask for money without having goals, objectives, outcomes, and timelines. So try to keep to one goal for your program and 2 or 3 objectives, and then what are those objectives going to produce in terms of outcome? Because no one is investing in your goals. They're not even investing in your objectives. They want to see the outcomes within a certain timeline. Is it going to take you 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? And that's where this section becomes really critical, because they say, okay, we're being asked for $25,000 to help 300 children get more out of their educational experience within a 3-year time. And then the goals and objectives will identify what more a better educational experience actually means. So as I said, 1 to 3 primary goals, and a lot of proposals I see will have 5 or 6 goals, 10 objectives. And when I read those, I say, you've lost me already, so that means you can't prioritize. Give me 1 goal or 2 goals and limit those measurable objectives. So remember the difference, and the students I work with inevitably forget this. The difference between a goal and objective is that an objective is measurable and it's time sensitive. A goal is visionary. So 1 goal, 3 to 5 measurable objectives, and tangible and quantifiable outcomes so that you can point to. Everything you will notice, the common theme in all of this is measurable and quantifiable, evidence-based. So nothing is pie in the sky, nothing is, isn't this a great idea? It is a lot more tangible than that. And finally, attach timelines to your objectives. So organizations or funders are going to want to know, well, when is this objective going to be reached? Maybe goals can't be have a timeline, but you can say within the next 5 years, our goal is this. Objectives are a lot more important and outcomes to attach timelines to. And even if it's broken up into 6 or 8 month increments, saying within 6 months, we hope to achieve these objectives and outcomes, within 12 months, these objectives and outcomes. The beauty of doing that type of attaching those kind of timelines is that you can report back to the foundation, and something that a lot of organizations forget to do is provide a stewardship report. Even when you're not asked for, and you said in your objective that within 6 months you're going to achieve a certain outcome, write to them in 6 months and say, you know what, we told you, we thank you for your funds, we told you, and here's what we achieved. And here's something that almost no one does and should do, is they write and that being writing to the organizations that have declined or that you haven't heard from, and said, we were sorry that you declined, but we still think you're a good match. And we wanted to bring you up to date on how this program is doing, so that in the future, when you applied, again, they might say, this seems like a very responsible organization. They're achieving their goals and objectives. So I always say, don't throw those declines away. And I see this all the time where organizations, I say, well, have you tried applying to this foundation? Yes, they declined us 3 years ago. Sometimes they'll decline you 3 years in a row. And then if you're persistent enough, they'll give you a small grant, and off starts this relationship. So important to know. Something we see more and more, although you can get away without it, is risk and mitigation. And Trillium is famous for asking about this. What is the risk of your program? And how will you mitigate those risks? Are there potential harm to the volunteers working in the program? Is there a way, if the program goes wrong, that the beneficiaries can be harmed? And so what happens if you don't raise the $1 million you need to execute this program? Is there a way the program can be scaled down to execute? So this section doesn't need to take longer than half a page, but again, it points to the fact that you've been responsible enough to think of risk and mitigation. And all of this section can sometimes be put into a table. And if you ever want to have an example of that, I have many, and all you have to do is write to me, and I'll provide you, again, that whole notion of, an illustration, a picture is worth 1,000 words. It works with a grant proposal. So if you can send a table that outlines the risk, how high the probability of that risk, and what you're going to do in the end to mitigate that risk, is a great way to clarify for the funder that you've looked at this important area. As I said earlier, what are your evaluation and key performance indicators? Remember that the more you put, the more you're going to have to measure. So looking at 2 or 3 key performance indicators, and being able to answer the question, how will success be determined? And you'll see this exact wording coming up in many grant applications. How will you determine success? After all is said and done, this question lies somewhere close to the bottom of the application form if it's an online application. But I tell you, it's the most important, one of the most important questions. How will you know when success will be determined? And embarrassingly, a lot of organizations say, we don't know. We know that 300 people or 500 people came through our program, and we did teach them something, but we don't know whether success was determined. We don't know if they're eating healthier. We don't know if more of them are graduating from school, because it's so expensive. And I agree with that, to follow these students or families or beneficiaries of programs. But it is really key now to do that. And in fact, many foundations will help fund your application. Even Trillium grant proposals have a section for evaluation, and to say how much is what are you going to do for evaluation, and how much will it cost? And I always suggest that is the worst thing to overlook and say, hey, you know what? Don't worry about the evaluation. We don't want to ask you for any more money. In all likelihood, what that communicates is that you're going to run your program and not evaluate it. And that's probably one of the worst things you can do. So look at 2 or 3 key performance indicators, or maybe 4, and answer the question how success will be determined. How will the program be evaluated? And who will evaluate the program? Is it going to be evaluated by someone internally, an expert in the delivery of that program? Are you going to bring a social worker from the University of Toronto to evaluate the program? Will it be an external evaluation? And there are benefits to both. But who is going to be responsible for evaluation? As I said, what are the key performance indicators that the evaluator will use? Finally, we get to the dreaded budget, as we call it in my class, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. And you know, again, we spend a class and a half usually going through financial figures and budgets. No one likes a 3-page budget, or a budget that has, you know, how many pencils you're going to buy, you know, and how many calculators you'll need. A summary budget is good. Remember, if they have questions, they'll ask you about them. Your budget really should connect to your solution and objectives, because they're going to say, I like the solution, I like your objectives. Now, how much will that cost? And all too often, what happens with grant proposals, we write a great proposal up, and then we go to the finance person and say, give me a budget. And they'll have no idea what you need a budget for. They might say, well, here's what we spend on the after-school program, and you slap that in there and hope it works. That budget has to be reworked so that it connects to the solution and the objectives. It should contain major project expenses. And the other important thing is sources of revenue. Now, you're not always asked for this, but it's good to have in your budget in case you are. I always find a little nosy of funders who say, well, where are you going to get your money from? And a lot of times you're going to be, well, we're just starting this the process. And no, we can't tell you how much you know, Meridian gave us for this program. That's confidential information. But if I had to say one fundamental error that organizations do when they create a budget for their fundraising, for their grant application, is that they fail to include what their contribution is. They fail to monetize their GIK, the space they're giving to the program, maybe the money they're giving, the volunteer, you know, and I'm sure you've all heard the importance of monetizing your volunteer and the volunteer hours to really get a true cost of this program. That helps your organization and it helps the funder, and it shows in the budget that you are a partner in this initiative. You're not just asking for a bag of money so that you can go out and hire people and run a program. Your gift in kind, what you're committing to the organization, has to be monetized. And you know, if it's a really important program, I mean, you're saying it's vital, why isn't your organization making a financial contribution? That's a question that comes up quite often. So your organization should be able to budget for the program and say, we're putting in 10,000. We have another 30,000 worth of space and volunteer hours that we're contributing, but we need $100,000 to run this program. And all of a sudden, that budget begins to make sense, and so does the entire ask. The funding request, and we see sometimes, well, this is our program, give us what you can. Not a good idea. We need to understand the project costs so that the funder can put their grant in perspective, and when we can, to see what part of the program will this grant fund. The reason for the request of this amount is important to put. Outcomes of the funding request, and that just repeats what's happening earlier. So again, a lot of information to put into one or two paragraphs. Quite often, I'll include why we've approached this foundation. Well, this foundation has a history of supporting community level or programs that help families living in community in poverty in this community. So foundations need to know, why are you asking us for this money, and really, what will the outcome of this $25,000 be? No worry about repeating that, but in the funding request, one person reads it. Think sitting around the table, and I remember doing that with Durham Community Foundation that has a very short proposal, and saying, okay, they need 10,000, but this is what they're going to achieve. Decision making is very easy at this point. And then the recognition and benefits. And we might all think that that's not important to foundations, but it is. Even those of you who prepare Trillium grant applications are saying, well, you know, we gave you, or we're going to give you a lot of money. How are you going to recognize us? What press conference are you going to do? How can we send the MPP out there to shake their hand and give a check? So recognition benefits are always important. You don't have to go over the top, but foundations generally want to know. They're going to be on your website. They're going to get updates. They're going to be on project material that you may be distributing. And then we come to the end, the part that many organizations start with, your history and achievements and your unique qualities. Don't forget, you have a website. And quite often I say, you know, all you need in this section is to learn more about the Ajax family for success. You know, go to our website. All you have to do in this section is say, we've been around, here are our achievements, and probably most important, what makes us unique in carrying out this program. And then finally, if you want, it's not necessary, an appendix. Appendix should be very careful. Remember, you don't want to make your proposal unnecessarily long, but if you can include partner organizations and testimonials from beneficiaries or even other funders, but I would say out of the three of those, if you can get letters, even if they're not requested, from any organizations that you work with, that is gold, and that should be put in your proposal. I realize we're running out of time, so I will go quickly through here. Again, you'll have access to this PowerPoint. But again, to recap, you know, writing these 10 components will save you time. It provides you with a template. It answers most of the questions you'll encounter on online application. It ensures your organization is ready to apply for grants, because you'll stop dead and say, you know what, we need to strengthen our evaluation. And it helps to improve organizational programs and services. Things like key performance indicators and an evaluation strategy helps your organization to become a better organization, because you're constantly evaluating what you do. So that's why it might take you 3 or 4 weeks to write this component, this template proposal. But once it's written and everyone agrees on it, you're off to the races. You'll find the other applications and proposals you're going to do go a lot more smoothly. I'm going to leave you with these, whoops, who's that handsome guy? With these 5 keys to success. If I had to boil it down, it would be these. Some of them we've talked about: document an unmet need, research funders that support this need. Don't write to everyone and anyone. Spend a lot of time doing your research. Develop a clear path to meet the need with timelines, goals, and objectives. Focus on results, outcomes, and evaluation, not on reach. People invest, whether they're responding to a direct mail letter or to a $1 million grant application. They're investing in results, and that's what they want to see. And finally, build relationships with your funders. If they say no, continue the relationship. Adopt practical stewardship practices. And I know we're all guilty of this, but how many times do we take the money and run, and next year, thank you for your $10,000 grant, can you bump it up to 15 because we're doing a great job, right? And they've heard nothing in between. No newsletter, no friendly emails from the executive director, nothing. A practical stewardship strategy to keep in touch with funders and with prospective funders can really make all the difference in your proposal. So that's really about it. If you have any more questions, I'm always happy to chat on the phone with you and talk about fundraising or grant proposals. My company's name is Fundamentals. And it was a pleasure giving this presentation. I don't even know if we have time for questions, or if there are any questions.
Peter, there are 2 questions in the Q&A. I think we can take a couple minutes and answer those.
Okay. I'm trying to see where here we go. What are the challenges of getting used to all the different platforms to use? So the first question from Paula, I find most frustrating thing when running a grant is the restriction on how, yes, that's it, that is frustrating. What is the best way to get your information across when you are limited for words? It's hard to include research in only 300 words, for instance, yes, and Trillium is famous for this, and some applications like Trillium, but many more are just don't allow you to go over. So I get frustrated too, Paula, with this. But then what I do is if I know I have a complex research or program to talk about, what I'll do is put it all down in a Word document, do a word count, and then painfully, sentence by sentence, go through and say, what can I live without? What is the most important? And it's a great writing skill to learn. I do that with a lot of other fundraising projects, but I think that's really the only way to get around. Now, there's other ways as well. Sometimes online applications will allow you to submit additional documents, and you can do a longer version of your program description perhaps and submit that, or an evaluation report. But yeah, I know it's tough. If you don't have that ability, then to submit additional documents, or those documents are just focused on your financial strength, it's tough. So you have to write it out and just whittle it down. And then it takes a little creativity. Sometimes the sentences you take out maybe can be put in an answer to another question. If you watched Mike Pence last night, he was a pro at doing that. He didn't even answer the question. He said, "I want to talk about this." So sometimes we can find space for the information we want to include in other parts of the application. And Eva Smith says, how can you describe a plan of action for an activity currently underway, i.e. sustaining a program or initiating a program? Well, Eve, I think that it's probably maybe easier to do that because you have a base to go by. If you can say in 2016, the program started here, and here were the objectives we want to reach. Our proposal, and a lot of proposals, are for expansion and scaling those programs. I think you can show that your plan of action will show additional people coming through the program, and therefore additional outcomes and results that will come out of that. So it's that logical chain that says we started here, we're here already, and to sustain the program or grow the program, we're going to be following these steps. I hope that answers your question.